Okay, welcome everyone. As promised, this week and next week, we are going to be learning about Pesach. And it's really a transition from what we've been learning, as we'll see shortly with the chart that I'm going to put up. Our mini-series on the Sefirot, and then our mini-series on understanding the names of God. So we're going to see how this is going to flow into what we want to learn about Pesach. I will mention it later as well, but we will be learning next week about Pesach, and then there'll be 2 weeks off. During Pesach and the week after Pesach, there will be no class. For all those who are on the WhatsApp, you'll get announcements. So hopefully everyone will come next week also. It will hopefully make everyone's Seder and Pesach more rich. So how we want to start this class is when we learned about the Sefirot, and when we learned about especially the 4-letter name of Hashem, we mentioned over and over again the idea of using the Sefirot and using the 4-letter name of Hashem as an organizational tool to be able to see just about everything. Remember, we've learned the verse many times, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. I put God before me at all times. And one of our interpretations is I see the 4-letter name of God before me in every process, in every circumstance that is happening. And we learned the same thing about the Sefirot. So what we're going to do tonight, I'm going to show a chart for just maybe 5-10 minutes. And we're going to move past that chart, but it's a good starting place. And what we're going to do tonight is we're going to take 4 numbers and we're going to use them the same way as the Sefirot, or the 4-letter name of God, is a context, is an organizational tool to be able to see just about anything. So we're going to be looking specifically at Seder night, the Seder of Pesach, the Haggadah, and Pesach in general, but specifically how these numbers are organizational tools to understand how the sages put together the Haggadah in a way that is everlastingly meaningful. The Haggadah is really one of the most important texts in all of Jewish tradition. The truth is, we don't know exactly who put together the Haggadah. We know it comes from around the time of the sages. Some of them mentioned in the Haggadah itself. But since Pesach is one of the most popular and populated traditions in Judaism, there are many, many Jews who hardly ever step foot in a synagogue, but will make sure that they're at a Seder of Pesach. And of course, the text we use is the Haggadah. And the Haggadah is a masterful educational tool. The educational philosophy behind the Haggadah it's made it 2,000 years. There are not that many texts out there that you could say made it that many years. So again, we're going to be looking at the numbers, and I'll tell you the numbers: 4, 5, 15, and 50. And we'll see how it plays out. So now I'm going to share a chart with you. And a lot of it will be familiar already because we've gone over a lot of this, but we're going to see now how to apply it to the Seder. There we go. Okay, so this is the chart. For those who know, this comes from 70 Faces in the section in the four-letter name of God. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from left to right, meaning what we'll call from below to above. We'll start on this side, if you see my cursor, and we'll go through these ideas and we'll move towards the right. Even though here we see, of course, Hashem's name is written from the right to the left. But here, we're going to go from what's called from below to above. So the first four levels, I'm just going to go through quickly because in previous classes, we've gone through this many times. And we want to get really to the bottom three parts of this chart to see how it applies to Pesach. So here we have Hashem's name, and beginning below, we have the four letters, a Hey, Vav, and Hey, and Yud. And as we learned, and this is a very, very important part of the Seder, is there's a hidden fifth level of the four letters of God's name, and that's called the tip of the Yud, Kotso Shel Yud. This we've learned, and we're going to see how it applies to the Seder. Now, along with the 5 levels or the 5 letters of God's essential name, so we have the correspondence, of course, to the 5 levels of the soul: the Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. And here, we're not going to delve into it, but we'll just review that the Nefesh is called the behavioral, instinctual part of the soul, sometimes called the animal soul. The Ruach is the emotional component of a human being. The Neshama is associated with the intellect. And here, if we're looking at the Sfirot, we're going from below to above. These are the behavioral and the emotional. These are the lower 7 Sfirot. The Neshama is Chabad, Chachma, Bina, and Dat. And then we have in Keter, we have the superconscious will. And the highest level of Keter is called, this is not, the superconscious will is connected to Chachma and the Yud of Hashem's name. And in Keter is the spark of God. Again, the point here is not to explain this in great depth because we've gone through 2 whole series about the names of God and the Sfirot. Here we have the Kabbalistic world that these letters of God's name are associated with, and the part of the soul. So again, from below to above, we have the world of Asiyah, the world of action. That's our physical material world. Yetzirah is called the world of formation. Bria is called the world of creation. We're like going up the ladder. Atzilut is a very, very divine world called the world of emanation. And then even above that is what's called Adam Kanbon, primordial man. This is not exactly when we think of the first created human being, whose name was also Adam. This is a pre-creation level. Now, having said all of that, we want to now apply this to Pesach. So I said that the numbers that we're learning tonight are 4, 5, 15, and 50. And we'll see how the whole Seder of Pesach is organized around these numbers. So we'll start with the cup of wine. We know that we have 4 cups of wine on Pesach. And in fact, the whole Seder is organized around these 4 cups. They're the highlight. They're like when we go from level to level in the Haggadah, it's punctuated by cups of wine. Now the question is why are there 4 cups of wine? Why not 3? Why not 6? And that is explained in the Talmud, that in the Torah portion of Va'era, so there are what are called 4 expressions of redemption. And in English, it's I will take you out, I will save you, I will redeem you, I will take you to me, to be a people. Now, these are just part of longer statements. I will take you out of the bondage of Egypt, and I will save you. I will redeem you, and I will take you to me to be a people. So it's explained that the 4 cups of wine at the Seder correspond to these 4 expressions of redemption. Now, this part of the Torah, there already have been, this is before any of the plagues. God comes and he makes like these promises, these expressions of redemption. I will take you out, I will save you, I will redeem you, I will take you to me to be a people. So it's explained. Now we're going to the bottom row here, what these expressions mean. I will take you out means I will take you out of Egypt by means of the 10 plagues, and I will take you out of the bondage, the work, the slavery. I will save you is I will save you by taking you out of the physical borders of Egypt. In other words, it's not enough that there were 10 plagues and now we're not slaves anymore if we ended up staying in Egypt. Part of the redemptive process is God saved us by taking us physically out of Egypt. I will redeem you. This is considered the miracles at the Red Sea. And I will take you to me means receiving the Torah at Sinai. So these bottom 4 lines here, this is really the organizational context in which Seder night happens. The Haggadah is based around these 4 cups of wine. These 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 expressions of redemption. But now let's go to the far right, and you'll see that there's a 5th optional cup. Now, what does that mean? Where does that come from? So in the expressions of redemption, along with I will take you out, I will save you, I will redeem you, I will take you to me, there's actually a 5th language of redemption, is I will bring you into the land of Israel. In the Talmud, the rabbis have a discussion whether in Seder night we should base the Haggadah around 4 cups of wine or around the 5th. And the reason is because we had already been in exile in Babylonia and Persia. When the Haggadah was being formulated, the temple had just been destroyed, and more Jews ended up in exile. And so there was a debate when it says, I will bring you into the land, whether that should be counted as an expression of redemption if the future is so unsure, maybe we'll be in exile again. Anyways, the discussion goes back and forth, and they decide 4 cups of wine, but we'll pour another cup of wine for Eliyahu and Navi. The cup is called the cup of Elijah, the cup of Eliyahu and Navi. And that's why you'll have a 5th cup on the table. Now, what's interesting is around 500 years ago, the Maharal of Prague, the famous rabbi of Prague, began to drink from the 5th cup because he said this will be a sign of our great longing to return to the land. This is Prague 500 years ago. But he felt that the time was coming that we would actually return to Israel. Of course, he was correct. And he wanted to make a sign. So he began drinking from the 5th cup without a blessing. We didn't make another blessing. I have to say that there's an unusual halacha about Seder night, is usually when you drink a cup of wine and then you drink another cup of wine at the same meal, you don't make another blessing. But on Pesach night, we say Borei Priagafen. We say the special blessing on wine for all 4 cups, but not for the 5th cup. And it's been a custom. Not everyone will drink from the 5th cup. Everyone pours the 5th cup, and it's on the table as a sign of our longing for redemption, our longing to return to Israel. And now many, many people drink from the 5th cup at the very end of the Seder. So here we can understand that the 4 or 5 cups of wine correspond to the 4 or 5 expressions of redemption, and also to the 4 or 5 phases of the redemption. Going through the 10 plagues, then leaving the physical borders of Egypt, then the miracles at the Red Sea, then receiving the Torah. And even though it took us 40 years, we did enter into the land. So this chart was to get us going here. And we're beginning with the numbers 4 and 5. So as we can see here, there are really 4 letters to the essential name of God. But later, Kabbalah added a 5th level, a very hidden level called the tip of the Yud. But we see this over and over again. There's 4 cups of wine. But there's really a 5th cup of wine. There's 4 expressions of redemption. There's really a 5th cup. A 5th expression. And there were 4 phases of the redemption, but really there were 5. Because from the moment that we left Egypt, the idea was to enter into the land. Okay, so now that we have shared that, we are going to continue. Okay. So we actually have a number of other 4s where there's really a 5th in the Seder. And so I hope everyone's starting to pick up I said in the beginning, the Haggadah is a masterful educational text based on like such deep concepts of how to give over information. And especially because we want to give over to our children, there is no night like Seder night. There's no text like the Haggadah to give over the basic faith of Israel than Seder night. And the more we go through this, the more we're going to see how the sages took numbers and used them to weave the entire Haggadah together. So we just saw a number of examples of 4s that became 5. So one of the two most important ideas of 4 in the Haggadah are what are called the 4 questions and the 4 sons or 4 children. And really the questions that are asked at the beginning of the Seder become the platform in which to give over the answer. And the answer is the whole history of the Jewish people. The whole history going all the ways back to Avraham, and hopefully we'll get next week, all the ways to Mashiach. The whole history, not just the past and present, but also the future, is all contained in the Haggadah. So the 4 questions, for every child, this is such a big thing to be able to say the 4 questions at the Seder. But what's interesting is there's really a 5th question. A 5th question we don't ask anymore. But at the time of the temple, there was another question. And that was, why is this night different than any other night? On every other night, we eat meat cooked in many different ways, boiled or fried or roasted. On this night, we only eat roasted meat. That's the Korban Pesach. The Korban Pesach was the main part of the whole meal. We don't have Korban Pesach. It has to be brought in the temple. The closest thing we have to Korban Pesach is at the end of the Seder, in the section called Safun, when the children bring back the hidden piece of matzah that we hide in the beginning. And then we eat that matzah at the end of the meal. That's in place of eating the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. So here we have 4 questions, but there's really a 5th. So again, this is like our 4th example of 4, but it becomes 5. Now there's one more, and this is a more modern one, but almost everyone mentions this at the Seder. Right after the 4 questions, so then we get to what are called the 4 sons, or the 4 children, the wise one, he's called the evil one, but it's not real evil, but he's a little contrary, call it that way, the contrary child. Then we have the what's called the simple one. And then there's the one who doesn't even know how to ask. There have been hundreds of commentaries written about the symbolism of these 4 children and what they represent. And of course, what the symbolism of the 4 questions are. But in recent history, unfortunately, most people make mention that there's really a 5th child. Who is that? The one who doesn't even come to the Seder. That's the 5th child. That even the other 4 are there, even the one who's called the contrary one, who's a little bit, they call him chutzpahdik. But he's there, he's at the Seder. And the one who doesn't know how to ask, he's there. But what about the ones who don't come? And unfortunately, in our day, we have too many, even though I mentioned before that there's so many people who won't do very much Jewishly the whole year, but will come to a Seder of Pesach. But then there's those who, they're so far away, they don't even come. So here again, you have the 4 children, but there's really a 5th one. So we've seen that the number 4 is the major organizational context that the whole Haggadah is happening. But now we see that there's a hidden 5th, but there's 2 other mentions of 4 that many people don't think of. One number we did mention because it's not like a major one through the whole thing, but we have 3 matzahs. We have 3 matzahs, and we're told that represents Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, our 3 patriarchs, or the 3 divisions of the Jewish people: Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. The priests, the Levite, and the regular person of Israel. But what's interesting in the 4th step, this is very significant. In the 4th step of the Haggadah, we break the middle matzah. So now there are actually 4 pieces of matzah. Even though we usually think there are 3 matzahs and 4 cups of wine. The 4 cups of wine represent the matriarchs: Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. So in the 3 matzahs and the 4 cups of wine, we have the patriarchs and the matriarchs. And this is similar to the shin on tefillin, that on one side there's the regular 3-pronged shin, looks like something like this. And on the other side of the tefillin is this unique 4-pronged shin. So that's like the 3 matzahs and the 4 cups of wine. So here we see 4 again. Now we take that, when we break the middle one in the 4th step, we hide it away until the end of the Seder, and the children bring it back. But this is so symbolic, this idea of hiding away this piece of matzah until really the future. It will only be revealed in the future. Now there's one more 4, and that is interesting. Most people are not aware of this, but in the discussion of the Haggadah in the Talmud, and they're discussing the 4 cups of wine, and we've already explained that the 4 cups of wine correspond to the 4 expressions of redemption. But there's another opinion that the 4 cups of wine are because when Yosef is in jail and the butler and the baker come, well, actually, Yosef went to them and said, "Why are you looking so sad today?" And they explained that they both had dreams. And so the baker ends up being hung, but the butler is exactly what Yosef said would happen, is returned to his position. But when the butler is giving over what he dreamt, the word cup appears 4 times. And so one of the opinions in the Talmud is that's why we have 4 cups of wine on Pesach. So at first that might seem, well, just because the word cup appeared 4 times, that's why we should have 4 cups of wine. But when you really think about it, because Joseph was sold and he went down to Egypt, and later, because of his dream with the 4 cups of wine being not 4 cups of wine, but the word cup being mentioned 4 times, he becomes the second most powerful person in the world, really. And he is actually able to save his family from famine. And they all come down to Egypt, and that's where the whole slavery happens. So this opinion is not the one we usually adopt, but it actually makes sense that the whole exile in Egypt began with Joseph going down to Egypt. And what happens if he would have ended up still in jail? So maybe his family never would have come to Egypt. Maybe they would have, God forbid, died from hunger. So we can understand the opinion that the 4 mentions of the word cup in the dream of the butler is one of the correspondences we can make with the 4 cups at the Seder. When we dip the parsley or a vegetable in salt water, we're trying to fix the brothers dipping Joseph's coat in the blood of a goat. That's one of the things we're supposed to be thinking about. That's how the whole story started. That's how we ended up in Egypt as slaves. Okay, so we've gone through lots of 4s, and now I want to try to explain what's this idea with a hidden 5th. I'm gonna start going a little bit faster now, so I can get in all of the numbers. In the Sefer Yetzirah, every month is associated with a letter and what's called a chush, a sense. So the letter of the month of Nisan is the letter Hey, which equals 5. This is, we're going to see why the number 4 seems to stick out as the organizational tool, but there's always this 5th level. It's because the letter of this month is Hey, which is 5. And the sense of this month is called Dibur, speech. Now, let's look at the connection between the letter Hey and speech. So we're told that speech, this is just how the body works, comes from 5 places in the mouth: the lips, the teeth, the tongue, the palate, and the throat. This is like a universal understanding that we were able to enunciate words, that the letters are coming from 5 different places in the mouth. So speech is connected to the number 5. And remember what we said, that why do we have 4 cups of wine? They're called the 4 or 5 expressions of redemption. Now, let's just look at what's the name of the text. The name of the text is the Haggadah. What does Haggadah mean? To tell the story. So here we're starting to see like lots of connections with the letter Hey and the number 5. There are 5 openings of the mouth. The letter of this month equals 5. There's 5 expressions of redemption. And the Arizal says, don't read the word Pesach. He put like a hyphen between the 2 syllables. He said, read it, Pesach. The mouth speaks. The mouth speaks. So the whole energy of the month of Nisan and the holiday of Pesach is the ability to express oneself. I once heard Rav Ginsburg give over what seems like a very simple idea, but sometimes simple ideas are the best. They stick with you. So he said like this, he said, on a personal level, what does it mean to be in exile? What does it mean to be in a state of redemption on a personal level? So he said, being in exile means the inability to express oneself. And what is redemption? The ability to express oneself. It's a very simple idea, but it's so true. We all know what it feels like when we feel bottled up inside, when we can't talk to someone that we need to talk to. We don't know how to express what we need to express. We don't know how to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And therefore, we feel bottled up, frustrated. That's what's called exile. And that being redeemed means I can express myself. I do know what steps to take to fulfill my goals. I do have something to tell someone, and I have the ability to do that without fear and without fear of saying the wrong thing. So all of these fives are connected. All of these fives are connected. Now, what's very interesting, I mentioned that in the fourth step of the Haggadah, so that's when we break the middle matzah, we end up with 4 matzahs. The fifth step, which is of course the letter Hey, that by far is the longest part of the whole Seder. It's called Magid. Magid comes from the same root as Haggadah, lahagid, to tell the story. And from the 613 mitzvot of the Torah, in our day at least, there's only 2 mitzvot on Seder night that are called from the Torah. All the rest at this point are from the rabbis because we don't have a temple. And without a temple, there's a few of the mitzvot that become what we call from the rabbis. So the 2 mitzvot of the night are eating matzah. Technically, many people don't know this. Technically, you don't have to eat matzah any other time during Pesach. Even though it's definitely a custom to eat matzah every day, you don't have to. It's not actually a mitzvah, but it is a mitzvah to eat it Seder night. That is a mitzvah in the Torah. The other one is to tell the story of coming out of Egypt on Seder night. We have 2 mitzvahs in the Torah. One is to remember coming out of Egypt every single day. And that we do because the rabbis put it in the prayers that we mentioned coming out of Egypt in order to fulfill that mitzvah. So every day we have a mitzvah from the Torah to remember that we came out of Egypt. But once a year, you have to do it on that night to tell the story. That's why the Haggadah was formulated in the first place, to help us fulfill the mitzvah of telling the story. So the 5th part of the Seder is when we tell, really that's when we tell almost the whole story. Before that, we make kiddush, we wash our hands, we dip a vegetable, we break the matzah, but we haven't told the story yet. And then later, we eat the matzah, we eat the moror, we eat the sandwich, we drink more wine, we bring the missing piece of matzah, then we say Hallel, and then Birchat Hamazon. But when do we tell the story? In the 5th part of the Haggadah. Again, this is not like random. It's crafted so brilliantly, because that's the whole energy of the letter Hey. That's the letter of the month. Hey means to express. The letter Hey means to express. That's why if you want to get someone's attention in almost every language, what do you say? Hey, hey. That means I have something I need to tell you. I need your attention. So the fifth part of the Haggadah is when we tell the story. And telling the story, you can't do it mentally. It's with the 5 parts of your mouth. And this is a little bit about the number 5. Now we're going to go the next step. In mathematics, there's what's called the triangle of a number. For those, many of you do come to 70 Faces, we're going to have a whole chapter on what are called triangular numbers. What's a triangular number? You count all the numbers up to that number. An example, the triangle of 4 is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. So the triangle of 4 is 10. What's the triangle of 3? 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 6. Now here's the one that we want to get to. What's the triangle of 5? If 5 is such an important number in the Haggadah, so the triangle of 5 is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 equals 15. So that, remember in the beginning, I said we're going to do 4 numbers, 4, 5, 15, and 50. And we're going to see they're all connected. They're all connected. 4, in a sense, has a hidden 5th. The 5th is transmuted into 15. Now, what connection does 15 have with the Seder? So first of all, it was in the beginning, just out of the corner of my eye, someone wrote a chat, because for those who were here in the beginning, I played a song from one of the Shir Hamalots. And I said, David wrote 15 songs of ascent. They're called the Shir Hamalot, the songs of ascent. So what does it have to do with the Seder? So we're told that David, he already envisioned the temple. He was the one who established where the temple would be, along with Shmuel, through prophecy. And they were already envisioning the temple. Of course, David's son built the temple. But when he built the temple, between 2 sections of the temple, he put 15 stairs. And these correspond to the 15 songs of ascent of Solomon's father. Because ascent, we think of stairs going up. So when the sages came to formulate the Haggadah, so how many steps did they put in the whole evening? 15. So all these 15s are connected. In other words, we have 15 steps in the Seder, which correspond to the 15 steps of the temple, which correspond to the 15 songs of ascent. But we have more. We know that during the Seder, there are a number of songs that everyone sings. A lot of the Seder we're telling the story, but along the way, there are different songs. And one of them, everyone knows, is called Dayenu. Dayenu means it would be enough. So the formula of the song is, if God would have done X for us, but not Y, it would be Dayenu. It would be enough for us. We'd be satisfied. And how many steps are there in the song Dayenu? Exactly 15. Exactly 15 steps. And then after you go through saying if one of them that's kind of astounding is if God would have brought us to Mount Sinai and not given us the Torah, Dayenu, that also would have been good. Everyone says, Dayenu? like, what do you mean he brought us to Har Sinai and he didn't give us the Torah? And then one of us is, I think, I don't have it in front of me, he gave us the manna in the desert, but he didn't give us Shabbos, Dayenu. Everyone goes, Dayenu? We can imagine life without Shabbos? Impossible. So a lot of people make like kind of drush on it. They turn that it would have been sufficient into like, how could it have been, how could we do without Shabbos? So of course they're both true. There's a certain level that even if we didn't get to the next step, that would have been enough. And then there's another way of looking at it, is like, how could we not get to the next step? We can't even envision something like that. The point is that there's 15 steps. One other connection, which is really an important one. What day of the month does Pesach happen, the Seder? The 15th day of the month, full moon. And it's not a coincidence that it's a full moon. And in fact, there are 3 holidays in a row that are full moons. And one leads into the other. The first one is Chubishvat, the 15th day of the month of Shvat, the new year of the trees. That's when the sap begins to flow in the trees. And we're told every year Tu B'Shvat will always come out right around the Torah portion of Beshalach when we actually left Egypt. And so it's explained, what does it mean that the sap began to run in the trees? That's the sap of redemption that starts to run in the full moon of Shvat. The next month is the full moon of Purim. And then the climax is the full moon of Pesach. So this number 15 is actually very, very important. And the last one we'll mention, I'll do it fairly quickly, is we know that the first 2 letters of God's 4-letter name is a Yud and a Hey. How much does Yud and Hey equal? 15. So this name of God equals 15. When we fought Amalek in the desert and we defeated Amalek, so afterwards, God said, Moshe gave over what's written in the Torah, is it says, Yad al Kes Ka, the hand of God, and here the name of God is Yud and a Hey. This is in the Psalms and Tehillim, the name Yud and Hey is used all the time. Hallelujah. That name of God, which really means give praise to this name of God. But in the 5 books of Moses itself, this name, I believe, only appears twice. And one is God puts his hand on the throne of God. And Rashi points out that the word for throne is written missing a letter. Instead of kisei, it's case. And instead of the 4-letter name of God, it's only the 2-letter name of God. And Rashi says, until Amalek, meaning until evil is wiped out of the world, God's name will not be complete. And that's why every day in the Aleinu, we end all of our prayers in Judaism saying, Bayom Hahu Yeh Hashem Echad U'Shemo Echad. And a day will come where God's name will be one, meaning the four-letter name of God. In a sense, until then, it's the two-letter name of God. That's the symbolism. And so Pesach, one of the parts of Pesach, is we say in every generation, they rise up to destroy us, but God saves us from their hand. But the first one, the one that represents the ones that rise up in every generation to destroy it, is Amalek. And that's where this name Yud and Hey appears. And that equals 15. Okay, now the number 50. So obviously 50 is 10 times 5. And we have to just realize that the context of all of Pesach coming out of Egypt is to receive the Torah 50 days later on Shavuos at Mount Sinai. And that's why right after the first day of Pesach, we begin counting Sfirot HaOmer. And we count 49 days, and the 50th day is Shavuos. So the context that everything is happening, beginning with Pesach, is this idea of 50. And of course, there is the 50th year in the Torah. There's 7 times 7 years, 7 sabbatical years. And then the 50th year is called the Yovel year. And Yovel here means the year of freedom. And so the number 50 is very much associated with freedom. We really don't have time to go into it fully now, but the letter Nun and the number 50 are very connected to Mashiach. In fact, one of the opinions in the Gemara, they ask, what will Mashiach's name be? So I believe there are 5 opinions. One of them is Yanun Shemo. Yanun is from the letter Nun. And that's this idea of 50. So the whole thing on Pesach is we're coming out to freedom. But that freedom isn't really realized, isn't really manifest until 50 days later when we receive the Torah. That is the context that all of Pesach is happening. And we begin that process on Seder night. So one other connection to 50 is it's in the Haggadah. It's a long part in the Haggadah where after mentioning going through the Red Sea and the great miracles, the sages have what it seems a bit of an abstruse discussion as to, well, how many miracles actually happened at the Red Sea? And so one says 50, one says 200, and the other one says 250. But they're all multiples of 50, all of them. And there's a lot of discussion, like they're just trying to build up the story here, but it's all connected to 50, the idea of the miracles, the freedom on the way to Har Sinai. And then there's 2 other connections I'll mention. And that is, it's brought down in the Zohar that there are exactly 50 times in the Torah that the words Yetziat Mitzrayim are mentioned. This is from the Zohar, that it says Yetziat Mitzrayim 50 times. So that teaches us that each day of counting the Omer, in a sense, is a Yetziat Mitzrayim, is going out of Egypt. And in fact, that's why we have this mitzvah of remembering going out of Egypt every single day, is because, in a sense, yesterday are now, if I don't move past yesterday, I'm stuck in the borders of Egypt. I need to come out of Egypt today. And I'm going to need to come out tomorrow and the next day and next day. If not, it becomes stagnant. We get bogged down. Remember, Mitzrayim comes from the word Meitzar, which means narrow place. So it actually mentions 50 times in the Torah the idea of coming out, trying to teach us that really on a daily level. That's why in the morning prayers, we have the Song of the Sea. It's to teach us that we need to cross the sea today, not just 3,000 years ago. I need to cross the sea today and get to the other side. And one last mention of 50, because we know that the whole Haggadah is based on questions and answers. And so it's brought down in the book of, Job, Eov. After the whole story of what happens to Job and how he's questioning God, and he's questioning his fate, his destiny, he's questioning God's judgment. At the end of the book of Job, God asks Job 50 questions. There are 50 questions at the end of Job, and Job is just blown away by these questions. Basically, God is saying, do you have any idea about anything that I do? Pretty much. And at the end, Job is just speechless. And so this is the idea of 50 questions, because the whole Haggadah, in fact, the whole Talmud is based on question and answers. Question and answers. And here we see from Job, there are certain questions that there are no answers that we can really grasp. And so there are many questions that we can. That's why we're totally encouraged to always ask questions. But we also have to know that there's certain questions we might not find answers to. And we have to say, Dayenu, Dayenu. Okay. We'll end with a bracha. I want to give everyone a bracha that we prepare properly for Pesach. And I don't mean just cleaning the house, that we prepare in a way that when we sit down at the Seder, we know what's about to, what's going to fly here. And it doesn't take us by surprise. That's why we actually have a Jewish law that 30 days before any holiday, we're supposed to start preparing spiritually, so that when we get there, it's not like, whoa, now what do I do? How can I take advantage? I didn't really prepare. Anyway, so I'm blessing everyone to prepare with clean houses and clean neshamas.